applying yourself and trying to get something else, basically white collar, blue collar, and individually learning that actually being in the trades was more satisfying than I think I would have ever had in any other job. Just, being outside, physical work, the feeling of accomplishment because you get to see what you do almost at least once a week, if not every day. It's a new job site. So there's a lot of turnover. It's not basically the old cliche sitting at a desk 9 to 5 and getting bored.
Results in the real world.
Yeah, it's tangible.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a really fun thing. It's not for everybody. And I know a lot of people in the trades, it takes them a while to figure that out, that's actually more intuitive to them, so.
So you were in a niche growing up. Construction trade, since your family, your dad was doing that.
Yeah, my brothers.
Hanging drywall, so you really kind of shepherded in this niche. So
Well, as my dad said, it was slave labor. And we took that and, all of us have made a pretty good living at it, so.
and it's what you knew and what was available for you to learn. At the same token, you were on job sites while you were learning the trade and doing the slave labor with your dad. So at some point, I'm thinking you must have looked at other trades and wondered, wow, what would it be like to be a carpenter? What would it like to be a concrete guy?
Well, you always have a dream of doing something different, especially when you can see certain trades maybe are getting paid more than you, but the learning curve, it's just a whole different scenario when you think about trying to branch and bounce into something completely different. Now, for me personally, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I know some guys that have done other trades. So to me, it was always a sports analogy. You can be good at several things or great at one thing. So
You had an opportunity to shine as a drywall guy based on your
it was a good
experience
fit.
and education. Yeah, good fit.
It was a good fit, but like I said, it took about a decade to realize that, because you're always looking over the horizon, hoping something else comes your way as you're building a family and developing some income along, through your 20s. And for me, it was that way. It was that struggle. Is this what I want to do? Even though I had a really good skill set early on, because I started learning it early on.
Your skill set in terms of as a drywall maker.
Right.
Were you ever a taper or were you
Oh yeah, no, the whole, yeah. No,
So do you understand what we're talking about?
I think,
Yeah, hangers and tapers. Basically, there are hangers and tapers. There are guys that don't hang. It's been my experience with drywallers that most drywallers do it all, or can do it all, or started doing it all, or are able to do it all. But I find the more professional drywall companies have the guys that hang the drywall, and then they have the guys that come in and do the taping and muddy. The taping and muddy guys don't hang, and the hanging guys don't tape and mud.
being that I was raised in the industry, you tend to learn more comprehensively what's going on. Some guys only hang gravel. They're just installers. And some guys are only tapers. Yeah, exactly. There are only tapers. Some tapers just don't want to have anything to do with the hanging, and vice versa. And then you have utility guys that know a lot about one aspect, and they might know 50% of the other, and they can mix and match. Whether they can make a living at one or the other usually depends on where they start.
Right.
So
Is Mike still good, bro?
yeah, I think he's still out there. I mean, he's a name. Like I said, I've been here since '79. He was here. I saw his name out there when I moved here. So I don't talk to him much anymore. Probably been a decade since I've even crossed paths with him, but I'm sure he's still around. Well, drywallers just don't. Yeah.
But it seems like drywall as a trade. Two aspects. Writing, hanging it, getting the walls covered with drywall. And actually turning those walls, or finished product. That's the two aspects of the trade.
Well, the easiest way I can say it, drywall's the beginning of the finish. Okay, because you have
Yeah.
all the rough end up to that point. So as far as the hangers go, the hangers vary through time and experience. And hindsight, they get experience in other trades' mistakes. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean they know the other trades, but they tend to have a good idea of what's wrong. So if something's placed wrong, if something's sized wrong, something doesn't feel right, usually the drywall guys know that because they have to fix the problem later if it's not fixed immediately. So
Because it's finished work, and that was very good thing to add to my knowledge, is drywall is really the threshold.
it's the beginning of the finish.
The finish.
It is.
Drywall goes on the walls, we roughed everything in, we're covering it all up now, now we're getting this.
Yeah, and we always assume all those other trades are done at that point with the rough end.
Yes.
Well, we gotta be careful. We don't fix it. Because I wouldn't expect the roofer to fix my work. So, but we can certainly identify glaring discrepancies. And I mean, obviously sometimes we don't know what's right or wrong, but there are a few dozen things that are traditionally the same error trade-wise, and we can identify that. So that's it. Well, a wire that's not hooked up. A wire that's dangling, going to nowhere.
Walls that are wavy.
Well, to a certain point, generally you can't really see the absolute waviness until the drywall is actually on, because you start to see shadow lines then, especially in the joints and stuff. So walking into a raw house, a few of us can walk in and spot things right off. But generally, it doesn't show up until you actually put the drywall on. Now, glaring stuff, yeah, obviously. Other things like, say, an exhaust fan in a bathroom that's not hooked up, easy to see, easy to miss by someone that's really comprehensive through the house, looking at everything, might miss that one thing. We check, a drywall guy, generally, because we're so close to that surface when we measure, we'll see it.
And when you see things like bowed framing, trimmers that were ground to king studs, and then something happens in framing that really makes the drywall not want to lay flat, and you know it's going to interrupt the finished work of the job. At that point, some point, somebody's got to make a decision. Hey, do we call the general or the job super, or do we get a framer back here to correct this? Or do we use cardboard shims, or?
Well, see, now you get into the politics of it, because okay, a couple different scenarios. We call it police work. Okay. Personally, I have a concept. I don't police other people's work. That's generally for the general contractor. He's in control of those guys. He can direct those guys. I can't. I can spot it, point it out. Now we have to decide, can I continue? Am I in on a set price? Okay. How bad is it? Is it recoverable? Because again, it can't ever get to the point, in my opinion, where I'm policing the whole job, because now I am doing the general contractor work. Now, if there's something that prevents me from doing my job, yeah, we have to stop. We have to raise our hand, raise a flag, or whatever. But as far as the paper shims and everything goes, drywall is intended to nail tight to the wall. Okay. In the old days, when they plastered, they had the long screeds, they would fill a lot of that stuff, but drywall is not, the intent of drywall is not to do that, So there's a give and take, there's a line you're gonna cross somewhere where now it's costing the drywall subcontractor money compared to someone else should have done this.
And that costs, depending upon how major or minor it is, that cost.
Correct.
If it gets to a certain point, you got to decide whether that cost is to be passed on to the owner, to the sub that created the problem. Right? So every job is going to be different. And I would imagine, my question to you is, are there any jobs where you just get to hang the rock?
Yeah.
And everything's great?
Well, grade's a very subjective term. there's industry standards.
Right.
Okay, now, some people go beyond those standards. Some people stay at them and some people fall way short. Okay, so again, it gets the political aspect of it. It's like you have to learn some kind of judgment skill along the way, what's acceptable and what's not. Because theoretically, it's wood and there's going to be discrepancies in wood. Okay, there's plates, there's nail heads, there's all kinds of things. And generally, a full sheet of drywall is going to kind of span all that. But when you start getting, like you said, door jambs that are out of the line, stuff like that, you can make that judgment when you see how bad it is. It's kind of a rabbit hole to go down because it's like, who do you keep passing it on to? Okay,
Right.
so somebody along the way has to be policing the job to ensure the next guy in, and then those tolerances and limits have to be established. Or
Yeah, and it seems to me that if you're doing the job the way it's intended for you to do it, and you find glaring discrepancies in the framing that affect the drywall,
Correct.
time to alert
Right.
whoever's in charge of general. Let's work together and get this fixed. But also, I'm willing to do a little bit, but I'm not willing to spend a bunch of money because I've bid it for X. I'm doing it at a fixed price.
from a subcontractor, yeah, absolutely.
And it's not, it's only
Absolutely.
fair. There's nothing unfair about it.
Right.
Because we're working with, like you said, it's an imperfect.
Well, the assumption is that the trades before you did everything they were supposed to do. Even us, I mean, good example, raw door jam. Maybe we leave the job, drywall sticking an inch past. Well, we don't expect someone to cut that off. We should do that.
Yeah.
But occasionally it happens. So if the door guy does it, no harm done.
Yeah.
But if we're doing it constantly and that's kind of our MO, yeah, that's something that we should be called on and forced to correct.
How has the work changed since you started? Before you answer that, let me throw out one thing. It seems to me that way back when you started,
A little
there was
different.
a lot less boomers and a lot less milk board. Things were cased a lot more. So
Yeah.
you guys weren't the finishers on doors and windows as opposed to,
Correct.
bulldoze is crazy in Santa Barbara.
Well, when I started, everything was nailed. Everything. Yeah, well, very little. You had maybe a pocket door that, like my dad, we didn't have a screw gun, we had a Yankee.
Yeah.
The old screw
Yeah,
Yankee.
yeah.
thing. Right.
You guys know what a Yankee driver is? Nobody, right?
Is it that thing where you go like that?
No, that's a bit worse. The Yankee driver, nobody? Not even you, Frank? They're screwdrivers that are, what was it? They're cut, they're ratcheting, but they pull out, and if you push them in, it spins the bit. Pull them out, it doesn't spin, and it's reversible. Reversible, but it's, they had all sizes. I had 2 pistol grip ones. They were really cool, but we didn't have screw guns. We didn't have those. We had drills. We didn't have screw guns. So we used the Yankee a lot. Now you don't even see, now they're probably antiques.
Yeah.
No Yankee drills.
Yeah. So, I mean, he had one in his truck. And so occasionally when there was a pocket door, hey, go get the Yankee, and then it was a problem finding screws sometimes because he didn't always have screws, everything was nailed. And so like for me, when I first started for 2 years, all I did was nail, practice nailing, fingering nails and nailing.
Everything was nailed. All drywall was nailed when I started doing this job, this work. And you think about screwing drywall, and it's a cupped nail. Very light nails, and the head is not flat, it's cupped. So, and when you drive a drywall nail properly, you drive it basically flush, your hammer scores the paper slightly, gives it a little bit of dimple, and then it's got a cup, and that's to to grab the mud. And hold on to that mud to make those nail holes go away, make the screw holes go away. And the screw holes are just below the surface, and they have that nice Phillips double slot to grab the drywall.
Give us
Drywall mud.
give a class of basic,
Mud.
just how does drywall work? What's the concept of drywall? In other words, what is it?
Okay,
And why is it made the way it's made? Is it made so that it can accept the mud that you put on it? And what about the nailing?
Short history. The way it was explained to me, and my apologies if I'm way off base, but this is the way it was always explained to me. Drywall became something back in the 20s or 30s when they were trying to make the lathing and plaster more economical, quicker, basically. Cheaper. So there was some struggle between the old school lath and plaster to the drywall industry.
At that point, it was 3/8 wood lath.
Pretty much 3/8 and a half inch.
Did Jim tell you about that? They talked to you about plastering. So prior to drywall, we finished interior walls variety of ways, mostly with interior plaster. And interior plaster was done with 3/8 lath, strips of 3/8 thick by 1 1/4 inch wide. It was nailed on with about a 3/8 gap in between, nailed on horizontally. So after there was stud frame, all your interior of all your walls, and your interior walls and interior exterior walls, physically by hand, started at the bottom and nailed on by hand these little strips of lath. And that was the ground for the plaster. The plaster went in and grabbed in between those spaces and laid on that rough wood lath.
Very few, to my understanding,
Super labor
drywall
intensive.
houses until the late 40s.
Yeah.
There was a mix. Okay, so what they tried to do originally with drywall is create a base for plaster,
Right.
and they had things called button board. Yeah, it was just little, I think 16-inch by 4-foot sheets with holes in it to the plaster would key in. Yeah. So fast forward to the 50s when drywall, particularly in California, drywall panels became very popular when, the way I understand it, again, after World War II, the housing boom, they wanted a quicker, cheaper, more economical way of doing walls, especially tract homes. So they started using drywall sheets, used to be called sheetrock, it still is, that's a USG brand. And a lot of the lathers transitioned into the drywall industry. So the old lathers, putting up the wood lath, started hanging the drywall. Mostly 1/2 inch, 5/8 only in the garage firewalls.
Whoever came up with, hey, we can get this product called gypsum, we can mine it. And we can smash it with put paper on both sides and it'll be like a wall.
Yeah, the thing about gypsum, I think the reason they use gypsum, again, the way I understand it, gypsum is the most, if not one of the most prevalent minerals on the planet.
Yeah.
And there's some chemical quality to the gypsum that when it heats up, it sweats and lets off moisture, which creates more of a fire barrier, which gives it that Type X fire resistant capability just through the mineral quality of the gypsum itself. Anyway, again, that's how it's always been explained to me. So
So there's obviously gypsum mines that mine this stuff.
Yeah. I know there's plants in Arizona. I think California's got some plants.
So it's not necessarily a renewable resource, because we probably have a finite amount of gypsum.
Well, it's not renewable, but it is recyclable. They have played around with recycling. So I don't know how cost effective that is, but I know back in the 70s, there was talk about maybe sending it all in one place. Now I know when you take it to landfills, you can separate it out. It's about half the cost to dump than it is regular rubbish. So it does have a recyclable component to it. Plus the gypsum's really good for the dirt. So I think if you crush it up and put it back in the dirt, it just kind of, it's good. I know gypsum itself is good for clay soil and dirt.
So you use different compounds for mudding the nails and taping and stuff. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, okay, so basically the drywall is installed and then all the joints and the screws and the mistakes need to be corrected. So it's basically a process of tape, embedding the tape in a joint compound. That joint compound, we call it all-purpose. Basically, the all-purpose embeds the tape, and the reason you use all-purpose is it has a bonder in it, a glue. There are other muds. Some of the muds don't have any glue in it, and they're more of the finished product, the topping. So you don't ever want to use a topping to start with and embed the tape. So you tape it, and that's what we call taping. Okay.
Tape the joints.
Tape the joints and use. Right. So I don't know. I mean, there's a joint in the wall, and you embed the tape. You would embed the tape over the joint using the all-purpose. That needs to dry.
And they tell you about the beveled edges, right? No. Yeah. All drywall, the long edges are beveled for 2 inches. So when that joint comes together, it's 2 bevels come together. So you've got room for that joint compound embedded tape and bridge that joint, and not be a bulge, because you're looking for a smooth wall. And as soon as you get it, in most
So that's your first
textures,
or the first step.
most drywall is textured. All these days, these glazed type 5 finishes are really in vogue. They're tough to pull off because a drywall like a skip and smear texture or a skip trowel texture is a texture over the whole, all the board. This is after the nails are done, after the tape joints are done, and that texture has a lot of height. So you still wind up with that all nice, relatively smooth, white or whatever color wall you paint, but it has a slight texture. Eggshells a little lighter, but these smooth finishes.
And then generally, most jobs or anytime you're doing any drywall work, there's usually inside a house or a finished area, there's usually a minimum of 2 coats. First coat, second coat. So that would be a first coat over the tape, and then a second coat over the first coat, and each coat goes a little bit further beyond and feathers the edge. Okay.
So when you say feather the edge, what in this particular joint is that tape's about 2 inches, right?
Tape's 2 inches wide.
2 inch mesh tape comes across this joint, and then the mud goes on it, and the mud goes on either side of it, and the more mud, so the sand in between.
Yeah. Okay. This is a good example. This is a recessed joint, and it's
By
a.
the way, stopping you right there. That's how drywall is made. Drywall is made on the edges. It flares in, so you create. Yeah, we have something.
So here's a piece. This is a 4x8 sheet, 1/4 inch. It comes from the factory like this. So we call this a butt joint. It's a factory edge. We call this a factory butt joint. It's cut square from the factory and it's clean edge. Almost always the long edges, we call them recessed edges because there's a little recess here. So this is a 1/4 inch, and then there's a little recess, less than a 16th probably, but let's just call it a 16th. And this is wrapped in paper and it's glued and sealed on the backside.
So it narrows.
So yes, and so that's what we have over here. So this is where the tape goes, and it's recessed so you can embed the tape and get close to this flat plane.
Right.
So after that's taped, next day after it dries, you would generally run a 6-inch knife or box over this. Feather the edges, don't leave big, like, see this edge here is feathered.
Feathers are pinned down.
Yes, as tight as possible. Okay, that dries, that's the first coat. It'll need another coat, second coat, a little bigger knife, let's just say an 8-inch or a 10-inch knife. Again, to cover the two edges, feathered, and that second coat. Again, that dries.
Now, aren't you muddying the nail holes in the first go around as well?
Yeah, you want to spin and look at this wall, that's a much better wall. Okay, so here's our recessed joint, transitions into our factory butt joint. Process is the same. The only difference between this joint and this joint has a recess, this joint has no recess.
So how do you get that joint?
We'll get there. Okay, so we've done two coats here. The same process is here, but a little bit different on the coating. So since this is a butt joint, we do tape it the same. Okay, but your first two coats would be here and here to create the feathering on the side of the tape. And then a little bit of we've created somewhat of a recess in the middle. That's first coat. Now the second coat obviously would be again here or here. So you're filling the middle and then you're going to hit the two sides.
Yeah.
Okay, second coat. Now the same thing with the screws. You're going to first coat it. It's going to dry.
Does that happen when you guys?
Generally, it happens when you're first coating here, you're first coating here. So the key for efficiency on taping is trying to keep the whole project in the same circular process. So you don't want to have second coat, first coat, finish coats all going on at the same time. You want to keep the process continuous.
And I would imagine you want the absolute minimum amount of mud to do the job rather than more.
Yeah, because here's what we're going to get to now with the second coat. What a skilled tradesman will learn over time is how not to crown the joints. If you start crowning, that's where the shadowing in the house, the lighting will start showing, and they'll highlight right out, and you'll see little bumps, little crowns. Okay, so that's the key to what you said about not using too much mud. You want to use enough to cover, but the bare minimum to cover. You don't want to use so much that you have to keep working it to get rid of that crown. So first coat, second coat, first coat, second coat. Now, these joints will, for almost any texture, which we call decoration, are good enough for most decorations. The butt joints, however, need a third process. We call it troweling out the joints. So that third day, you'd be troweling out the joints. You might be doing a little touch up, and this house isn't a good example, but if there was an 8-foot ceiling here, there's going to be an angle here. Now this angle, we have tools, we call them angle boxes. It gets hit with it, it's already taped, just like that, just like the embedment. And so generally we trowel out the butts and run the angles on that third day. Now, after that, it's all dry. There's some sanding that happens to maybe, when you can. You don't have to, and then that depends on the talent of the taper.
Right.
Because that's your whole goal over time with experience, is to continually improve to where there's less and less sanding.
Less and less work on, less and less man hours of people
Right.
touching the same part of the
Right. A good taper can get all the way to this process without any sanding. There might be some brush down because you'll have comb boogers. There might be a little blob or something that needs to be knocked off. But generally, everything we use is sandable. So any mistake we make, you can sand it out. So the more you're limiting that,
Yeah.
the more efficient you are. Okay. So, but there's generally some brushing down, sanding, just to take off some of the edges. And again, it depends on the texture. Depends on the finish texture.
It's a skip and smear.
Skip and smear, there's hardly any sanding because the texture itself is so heavy. It almost looks in places like it's not sanded. So generally, the lighter you go, the thinner the texture, the more sanding there is.
So a glaze or number 5 finish.
A level 5 is the ultimate smooth. We can get into textures if you want, but level 5 just means that all paper surface area is skimmed with a thin layer of drywall compound. Okay. Level 4, starting with that's level 5, that's Cadillac. That's basically, it's counterintuitive, but the smoother you go, the more work it takes. because you have to take out all the imperfections. Even though we're starting smooth, we're starting smooth. So you think, well, I don't have to do anything with that, but you do, because the drywall mud itself has a different paint absorption than the paper. So you want to make one skin, so when the paint goes on, you don't get the phenomenon we call flashing. Everybody's done everything correct, but the paint itself acts a little different between mud and paper. So level 5, the theory is a complete skin of compound. It's all one surface, so everything should work the same.
So the guys that were doing the texture, especially doing the final texture, well, that's pretty artistic.
Let me get rid of this.
That's a pretty artistic hand. That's a real art. It's an art. There's no one
Yeah.
really can call it. And unless you're natural, you practice and you're really good at it. Could you tell us a little bit about back up the art of hanging? Because what kind of tools does it take? Do you need saws? Do you need stuff like that? I mean, what tool?
Well, hanging for me, in the way I was trained, it's a dance. You have two people hanging the big sheet, so you have to operate
And you
together.
like to hang 12 foot. I understand drywall guys like to hang 12 foot sheets because it's just more board, more wall. More wall you cover the sheet, the less sheet you're gonna hang.
Less joints.
And less joints. Less butt joints.
Real quick on the math, you have an 8-foot sheet and 12-foot sheet. So theoretically, if you use 12-foot sheets, you've already cut everything down by 1/3 because you don't have this extra piece. Now, if you have small rooms, yes, that's great. But usually in a global environment, the whole house, you're taking all your cutoffs and you're using them on your small walls. So that's why we use 12-foot sheets for it's more economical, it's better on the taper. It is bigger, but
It's hard to hang on a 5-inch.
but that's just what the trade is. They make them bigger. They make them up to 16. Generally in a lot of large tracks, you'll see a lot of 14-foot board because bedrooms are 12 plus, less than 14, sometimes bigger, but you're cutting down on the butt joints.
Do you ever hang drywall vertically?
Yep, oh yeah. Sometimes it's,
There are positions that just.
yeah, a lot of times it'll be spec'd out for it. Generally, that's more of a commercial, institutional, hospital, school, where it's just spec'd out to hang it vertically.
Is there any-
Yeah, sometimes sound, sometimes fire. A big long wall with a lot of light exposure, it's not a good idea to go vertically because then it has a tendency to flash the joints more because now you've got vertical joints compared to horizontal joints. Sometimes the sun, yeah, and you always stagger your butt joints.
Always. You guys never line up the budget.
Not intentionally, not intentionally. You should always stagger them. And part of the reason for that is it's finish. This is a more difficult joint to finish and it's going to finish wider. You're going to create a little bit of humpage in here and that's why we go wider to flatten out the hump. If you line that all up, now you've got a really long, big hump. So stagger them. Structurally, it's better. I'm not sure. It could even be a code thing. I don't know. But it's just a common practice to stagger your joints.
What are the tools? What's the drywall gonna have in it?
Well, back to what we talked about in the beginning. In the beginning, it was just a knife, a circle cutter, a saw, and a hammer. Okay, and a tape knife. Okay, so yeah, the rasp. My dad always called that an apprentice cheater. Okay,
I always
a
used it.
rasp can be used at times when it's necessary, but the more skilled you are and the more experienced as a journeyman you are, you don't need it because everything you can do with a rasp, you can do with a knife. It takes a long time to learn it. So
What's the process? What's the process of cutting drywall? Just because some of the people in my class will not know how drywall is cut. Can we have you cut a piece?
yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Don't try this at home, by the way, what he's about to do. It's pretty complex, just when you think drywall is really simple. I just want to see what you guys are seeing.
The piece of.
This is just a-
version.
Yeah, it's moisture resistant board. It's also got a mold inhibitor in it. So everything these days for the last, say, 20 years has come with a mold inhibitor in it. All moisture, I don't know of any moisture resistant drywall that does not have a mold component to it.
MR board, it has the moisture, it has the.
MR board, it's all got some sort of mold. I mean, it may be out there. I just don't know. So, funny thing is, we still call it grain board because the industry standard way back in the day, all the moisture resistant drywall had green paper on it. And that's why we call it green board.
Now, are you aware of the fact that to hang MR board ceiling in the bathroom, you have to have 12-inch centers on it?
Not anymore.
No, that's still.
That was the green board. Back in the day, green board was never tested on the ceiling, so it was never allowed on the ceiling. Okay. So then they have issues with that. So then they started with the 12-inch thing. Now, the way these have been manufactured and tested in the last couple of decades, it's okay to put it on 16 center ceilings. I'm sure some manufacturers still have it in their data sheets from products that they may still have on the shelf. But generally, we've never had an issue with it.
Well, there was a code issue for a couple of years. That's what I remember. Like, what?
And,
12-inch centers.
even more than that, where it wasn't even allowed on the ceiling.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the rationale of that is that if it got really wet, it would fall on you.
That makes sense. Yeah, drywall doesn't like water. Okay, so two types of cut. This is a rip cut. Rip again along the long axis. You know, just a 6-inch rip cut. Okay.
You just did that.
That's way harder than it looks.
Yeah, I know. It looks like a rock there.
You did. You don't even have a straight edge. You're using your hands.
Magic.
to measure.
So again, you know, if you want, okay, so that's 6 inches. Okay. So if you want 8 inches, you just, you know, you put the 8 and you lock it in on the edge. And again, this takes time. It does take a skill set. And then you get an 8-inch rip.
And what Rob just did is he scored that sheet.
Yeah, you're basically cutting through the paper, maybe a little past the paper. Especially the smaller you get, you got to go a little deeper. Okay, so these are rip cuts. So basically, rip cuts are some of the easiest to break. Once you score it, you just need kind of a positive, negative pressure, and it'll break right at the score. Now, just a quick thing. If I had cut this one a lot deeper than this one and I did that same pressure, the tendency probably would have broken there instead. Okay, so it's cut. Basically, again, with the rip, it's easy to snap now. And then
So you didn't come and cut from the backside?
no rasp.
You didn't cut from the backside?
Don't have to. Sometimes you do. I mean, and then you learn that over
You
time.
have a cut, break and cut from the backside.
You learn over time when it's necessary. Okay.
But you saw the way that broke.
Well, I can feel it. I can feel it. Especially with a rip cut. Rip cuts, again, they break a lot easier. Okay, end cuts or butt cuts. This is a pretty small piece. Basically, it's the same thing. Now I'm going to do this without a T-square. A full sheet, you can put a T-square on it and do the same thing. But this is basically factory edge,
You got a good straight edge.
easier on the finger, rough edge, a little rougher on the finger. You can still do it. So this is an end cut, butt cut. They're cutting something off the end of the sheet, same thing. We'll go 6 inches. Oops.
Ooh, I just cut my finger off.
Sometimes if you go over it again, following the same groove. Now, see, these are a lot harder to break, especially since it's a small piece. If it was a big piece, I'd probably get back here. And again, it's negative, positive pressure. snap it. Now, see, this is when generally you'll want to cut the back. Yeah, and you don't have to do 100% of it, but you got to do enough to relieve the pressure of the paper holding it together. You can cut it from the back, or you can score it from the inside, and then it comes apart. Again, it doesn't work that clean every time, but you learn that over time when, I mean, it's just like any trade, you start to feel it. Okay?
Yeah, no, I can see it. It's when you're using the carpet, right? We don't
Yeah.
score and clamp,
Yeah.
and get our guards out of the way and all this stuff, right? To cut something, where
Yeah,
not only do you not have to use saws and stuff like that,
Right.
you can use your finger and a tape.
sometimes, I mean, the drywall hanging part's more like playing hanger. You just gotta get close. Taper's gonna fix your mistakes, right? So, woodwork, the tolerances of especially finished woodwork are so much smaller. You can see a 64th of an inch pretty good. But an 1/8" crack in drywall isn't that big of a deal because it tapes, okay?
Fills with mud.
Fills with mud. Now, 1/2" gap is too big, but still our tolerances are a lot different.
You're able to do that. It's really helped me out. Is, we get a lot, ceiling walls are almost never flat and straight. A lot of times, not fully. Ceilings, whether the level or not, it's not that, that's an issue as well, but they have a lot of waves, a lot of force. They're not flat and straight. You gotta put things to them. So
Correct,
a lot of times, we, as you guys come back.
correct.
Pull and float.
Float it.
We'll have a crown building with a.
Yeah.
It'll touch on this side and we'll have a
Right.
1/2 inch to 3/4 on this side. And you'll be able to, after building up, you'll be able to pull that. So you don't have the perspective, because your eyes don't look at the ceiling to see how you've done that. And yet from here,
Yeah,
like where it's supposed to. So you guys are able to really, this is where I find drywall guys absolutely artists.
they can be, and that's, and you said it, if the crown's up, we can float to it and kill it and make it look perfect. What we can't do is go in there before and create that 12-foot long straight milled piece of surface or straight surface for a milled piece of wood to go tight to,
Yeah,
so.
you need something to pull too.
That's usually the best way to do it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way we too. So let's, what else can you tell us? What else have you told us about drywall? But what we didn't finish with is I'm kind of cutting off on the texture. Because we're
Well-
working this down through the.
Yeah, we've got 2 coats, we've troweled out our butts, we run our angles. Now, basically, you might go through and just kind of lightly sand or what we call brush down. Then it depends on the texture, you got textures are various. Old school spray-on textures, you had your acoustic ceilings, popcorn ceilings. You had your walls sprayed on knockdown, which is more of a heavier texture, it's still sprayed on. Orange peel, which is a little lighter. Generally, most houses, and even if the house was a knockdown, the kitchen was an orange peel. I would say the cleanliness.
Kitchen walls, you want it as smooth as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want anything heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For the last couple of decades, it's either been smooth or a thing we call cat's paw, which is a flat and smooth sanded texture. I'm sorry?
Tight cap.
Yeah, it's flat and smooth, but it has basically a little intentional blemish in it. It's a little easier and quicker on the end to sand it because you don't have to stop, remove that blemish and continue. You can just sand it and keep going. And then it's just a variation of how many, how big, how defined, as far as the degrees of that kind of texture. And there's just all kinds of others, there's sponge textures, plaster textures, sand textures, but those are less used, I guess. So.
What about other tools besides the razor knife?
For hanging, as far as the hanging, it's kind of moved into the electronics. There was the moving out of the nailing into the screw guns, which was a plug-in drywall screw gun.
And then are you using the drywall screw guns, like a clutch and.
Okay. After the plug-in screw guns, the cordless ones came out. They all have the clutch. Cordless has a clutch and the plug-in ones had a clutch. So now, where were the battery operated ones when I was doing all my work? Because we always drug those cords around the house and, you know, you get tangled up and everything. So the outlet boxes, traditionally were always cut out with the knife, measured all four sides, penciled in, cut it out, you saw it out, knife it out. But now 99% of them are cut out with a router, and they're just marked. You kind of cover the wall, tack it lightly, the box is underneath, the box is marked, and then you go around the outside edge. Dale, you got a router real quick? Other than that, the tool the basic hand tools have kind of stayed the same. There's a little short keyhole saw. Here's a keyhole saw. A lot of guys don't use this hardly anymore because this has taken its place. It is still used by a lot of old guys like me. Then we have a big saw for cutting big pieces, but still the routers use 99% of the time. And it's just a simple router. It's just a roto tool with a drywall bit on it. It'll go right through.
Cool. Take a break. Turn the lights on, please. Lights on. Take a 12-minute break. Come back at 8:30. Right, bushy-tailed. Do the final part of our presentation tonight, which will be hopefully a treat, a visual feast for you guys. We'll see. Okay, Lou, you there? Joel, you there? Tom, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody please remind me to, I'm so sorry to record that first part. So what do you think about Rob? What do you think about Rob Thayer? Everybody?
Cool guy.
Yeah, he's a very educated guy. He's a really smart guy. Remove pin. Gonna remove the pin. That's weird. Okay. So, yeah, I really enjoyed him because most people don't think all that much about drywall. They don't think there's much to it. There really is a lot to it. And like I kept kind of stressing in the video, it's very artistic. Those guys, you know, like, well, for instance, his cutting, which is, you know, guiding his finger and holding a razor knife on the end of the thing, like, it's awesome, man. So basically, there's no tools to drywall. These guys make pretty good money. I don't know if drywallers are paid by the hour now. I know drywall contractors, it's a whole different ballgame, the contractor. Drywall guys are, I don't know what they make an hour, but I bet it's good money. Drywall used to get paid by the piece. You would get paid by the square foot of the house or by how many sheets you want. But piecework is illegal. It's, although I'm sure some guys indulge in it still. But I bet they make good money. And what do they got to buy? They got to buy a battery operated router to cut out, a bunch of razor blades for their razor knives, and they can flip them over, right? Use it and then quick release, flip it over. A drywall saw that costs about $11. You know, it's just like they got no investment in tools. This kills me. And they don't even need the T-square, right? Just break, cut. It's crazy, but a drywall job can make or break, drywall job can make or break your job. Because it's the first part of the finish that goes on the walls, and it is the walls, and it shows, and Alex just showed me some stuff. Not drywall, but it's Calcor. Who knows what Calcor is? Or Unical plaster. So these days, you rarely see real plaster, real lath and plaster. You will occasionally see it. They'll do it like a Vasari plaster, use different underlayments, but they'll use a real plaster, and it's a decorative thing, right? But if you're going to plaster a house, you're going to use Unical plaster. Unical plaster goes on about a 1/16 of an inch thick to an 1/8 of an inch thick. And as opposed to drywall, where there's 3 applications of taping and mud, taping and mud, and taping, or not tape, taping and mud, and then mudding and then mudding, and then the texture. In Unical plaster is 1 application. You tape the joints, and then you start and you apply the plaster over the whole wall, and you just keep going. You keep going, and you don't come back. You might come back in sand.
And it goes on top of the drywall?
Goes on top of the Calcor, or a Calcor, which is used to be blue board, but now the board's different colors. But it's treated. Its paper is treated to accept that Unical plaster. So it looks just like drywall. It hangs like drywall. It pretty much cuts like drywall. It's hard to tell it's not drywall, but it's specifically to take Unical plaster, which is real plaster. It goes on thin. It's a highly developed plaster. It goes on thin. It goes off really hard. Drywall is not hard. It's very soft. You can take any drywall texture and just take your thumbnail and score it. The paint will protect the drywall from you doing that. Plaster, you can't do that. Plaster is hard. It has cement in it that makes it hard. And it allows you to, and you plaster a house, to start at one end and go to the next, and not do all these back and forth applications. Usually cost more money, but it's pretty unforgiving in harsh light, as your pictures showed. Alex working on a house. I don't know if you know Alec, but he's been my student for a couple of years. And when I first encountered him, I recommended him to somebody. He's been working for him ever since, and he's kind of a right-hand guy for a project manager on a pretty, like I'd say, a $10 million build in Campanile Hill that's got some really incredible features, incredibly expensive, incredibly difficult, incredibly problematic features. But the walls are just coming out like hammered death. I mean, oh my good golly, man. You get the light on them, a particular light, and they're just all over the place. They show bad framing, they show every scratch. That's the thing about a smooth texture and a painted texture, a really high quality texture, high quality wall. You cannot get away with imperfections. They're highlighted, right? So people in the cabinet making, everybody wants everything for less. And so people would say, well, how much for paint grade? Paint grade's cheaper, right? We'll go, yeah. And initially for us, it would be a little bit cheaper in how we do the cabs, right? How we build the cabs, because it costs us a little less for alder, which is what we use for paint grade material. But the thing about paint grade is you can use Bondo. You can sand and fill, and you can do all kinds of things that you can't do with stain grade, right? But you can't hide anything in paint grade. There is no hide in a good paint job. What I mean by that is every imperfection in that wood will come out with a good paint job. So your prep has to be perfect. If you're going to put Bondo and fill any dings, you're going to have to sand that butt smooth. I mean, like a car. Just think of a car. A good finish that's really smooth has incredible prep work on the underside. Whereas, on the other hand, if you're doing a stain grade job, you've got an oak, red oak, white oak, anything that's got any figure, and pretty much any wood does. You've got a lot going on anyway, and then you put on a stain. light or dark, then you've got more going on. You have a lot of hide. You can hide imperfections. You don't get that like sheen of a gloss white. Like I've done piano quality work for Dick Wolf. Dick Wolf, that produces Law and Order. He's got an unbelievable house in Montecito, a bunch of houses now, mansion, but for his theater, pardon me?
And a nice boat.
Yeah, he's got a nice everything. His theater is twice as big as this room with, leather seats, this big control panel that does the that thing, from Law and Order before it comes up, his digital library. But I did a bunch of cabinet making stuff, pieces for the kind of stage and for a lot of equipment, and wanted to be gloss black, a piano, Baldwin grand piano black. Man, hard to pull off, really. Okay, so without further ado, so we're not here too long. Just remember, next week we'll do a review, and we'll try to get you really all ready for your final. The final exam. So in the meantime, let's take a, I'm going to this cabinet making webinar on Friday. This will be fun. The new modern cabinet making. Okay, where am I going? Screen sharing, right? Okay, good. Which is tough. Get out of there. Okay, so I built all of these, that. These are, I think all of these were homes that I entered, work that I entered into the Builder of the Year over the course of 15 years, maybe. I think all of these have won, and some of them didn't win, actually. But these are my projects. That's not my project, although I did do some project management on that house after I sold the company. That's all mine. That's not mine. That's all mine. That's not mine. That's all mine. That's mine. That's mine. Actually, after I sold the company, but I drew that, designed it, $85,000 treehouse. Yes, and it is. That's all mine. That's all mine. That's not mine. That's not mine. That's not mine. 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 So these guys got it, and that's mine. Last BS ones. So let's look at the most interesting. Well, actually, look at these gates. These gates are just over the top. They're made of Afromorgia, which is sometimes called African teak. It's not as dense as teak. It's not as expensive. It's not quite as colorful, but it's just absolutely gorgeous. We didn't get. These are gigantic gates. By the way, these gates disappeared in mudslide of 2019. They went away. Most of that wall went away. A boulder, as high as this room, went through the living room. Stuff happened. And that's the finish. And then when the people, there's a whole thing happened, and it turned out the people didn't like them staying like that, so they faux them out. They painted them and like faux them. It's like a faux, like they tried to make them look really old. It's just, so this house here, the book house, in 2015 I retired. I announced my retirement pretty much at the builder of the year, which I won best new residential construction for this thing over $1.5 million, and I won the overall builder of the year. So the builder of the year is this big thing the Contractors Association does. Used to do it every year. Now it's every 2 years. It's at Radisson. It's 250, 300 people. It's done like the Academy Awards. And, you know, it's morphed over the years. I was the MC for a couple of years until I told some pretty off-color jokes. I'll never live it down. But anyway, it's a kind of a big deal in Santa Barbara construction. And I had entered over a few years. It used to be a pretty big deal to enter, got less and less hard to enter. But the projects are just, I mean, really hard to compete because, you know, we have incredible projects in this town because there's so much money being spent. The projects are just phenomenal stuff. So it was, the competition just got stiffer and stiffer, but, you know, and I had won 4 or 5 or 6 times over the years in different categories. There's like 13 categories. And at the end of the night, it's kind of like best picture, right? They go through all the awards and at the end, and then the best picture is, so at the end of the night, it's the contractor of the year. So, you know, I won in 2014, I won an award for best new residential construction costs in that category. And then at the end of the night, you know, contract of the year, I won builder of the year. Used to be contractor of the year, now it's builder of the year. And it was a great way to go out, and going out on with this job, because that's the best picture, right? Which I can't believe is not in a gallery. That's just dumb.
When you were building this house, did you know you were going to retire after?
No, I had a heart attack while I was building it, and it should have been a fatal heart attack. Obviously wasn't. I survived, and then it wasn't too long after that I decided I was going to hang my spurs. So no, while I was building, I didn't know I was going to retire. And while I was building it, there just wasn't a lot of work either. It was incredible. We were in a big slump, 2008, 2009. But it's a stack of 10 books. The spines are copper, the covers are copper, and the pages are brass. The cost, when we did it in 2009, I guess, to skin the building was, I think, $785,000. To $925,000 just for the exterior skin.
Like, was it like stainless plated brass or?
No, brass, sheet brass and sheet copper, like 20 mil.
Wow.
Yeah, over Grace Ultra, over Dense Glass. Yeah, he wrote every one of these titles, Ted, the owner, and the man who sculpted these things. The bare lot was just this hillside, you know, and the plans were, they were this big. There was a foam core model of it, and it'd been a long time to get approvals with the city, and the city was reluctant, and the city finally, when the city came on board, they came on board all the way. They loved this house. The glass in this house was so hard to pull off. Now, the architect had this glass as all one piece. Like this thing here, I think it starts here and it goes 35 feet that way and goes to a point. He had that as one piece of glass. This piece here, he had that as one piece of glass. Nobody was doing that. The glass was the infill between the stacks of books, and it was just a nightmare to do. And the writing was all on the wall initially because the budget was try to get it done for as cheap as possible. And I had 3 guys, and I had 2 guys at about $165,000 for the class. And I had 1 guy at $88,000 or $90,000. So yeah, that guy, we want that guy. I go, no. I said, you don't want that guy. That's not the guy we want. No, we want that guy. We like him. I said, well, let me vet him. Let me sit down with him. So by the time I got done with him, I knew him too. He was a local guy. The other 2 guys weren't. Well, no, actually, all 3 were local guys. But the one guy is more independent. They really liked him. His mom played classical piano and Ted plays classical piano. So I got him up to like 130,000. I said, well, did you get this? Did you get that? Make sure we got this. So that felt not quite reasonable, but a heck of a lot more reasonable than his initial figure. And then ultimately it cost 150 or 60,000 anyway with his change orders, and he just strung the project out. And he got Ted so mad that Ted fired him. Theodore Roosevelt Gardner II, the builder or the owner of the house, he just was the worst part. But these were so hard to do. I mean, see that right there? That angle, it's a compound angle, and nothing is square, and it's glass. And there's no slot, there's no casing. It's just, everything about this house was hard to pull off. Now that Volkswagen right there, Ted has all these sculptures all over, right? He's got maybe 500 sculptures from the size of the Volkswagen, the size of a house, to the size of the chair, outside sculptures. He is a sculptor and a collector of sculptures and specimen landscaping. This is on 20 acres. And his piano house, his residence is also on the same property, separated by this little creek, little draw, and then there's the book building. Well, Ted, that's the driveway right there. Ted didn't want to see the compressor / condenser for the AC unit. Two zones, one for one side of the house, the west side of the house, and the east side of the house had a separate condenser. It's a big unit, it's about like this, and Ted didn't want to see it. So we ran the line sets under the driveway, part of the driveway, and into the subterranean basement, which is 14 feet below grade, all CIP, that's cast in place concrete. And then we put it on a pad, and then Ted put a Volkswagen up there. Because there's a bunch of Volkswagens kind of climbing up. There's no real good shots of them, but that was Ted's solution. Very incredibly creative guy. This is some of Ted's sculpture. That's looking up at that nightmare window. And one of the books is it comes through and into the building. And then, every 4 inches is a recess in the brass, and that describes the lines between the pages. So it's a 7,000 square foot sculpture is what it is. This bronze, now at the time Ted was sculpting, he was he sculpts in clay, and then makes molds from his clay. And his molds go down to Masters in Metal, a foundry in Oxnard, and then all these bronzes were cast. Well, that right there, that book point right there, that spine was supposed to land right here. There wasn't supposed to be any space there. I didn't catch it. The Red Iron guys, by the time the Red Iron guys did the skeletons, framework, the infill, by the time we got to there was no fixing it. We were going to make it all work, but Ted said, that's fine, I'll put something there. And so we came up with that sculpture.
Is he the guy who did the dolphin fountains?
No, that's Bud Bottoms. Bud Bottoms. Yeah, but you see how intricate the sheet metal work is on this. It's just beyond belief. And there hasn't been one leak in this house in the 8 years or so, 8 or 9 years since I built it. 10 years. I can't remember, time flies. Not one leak. The skylight. So these I-beams, there was 21 load points in the house. So 21 points, 21 I-beams on load points. So those were the pure footings, right? Continuous footing tied together, the perimeter of the building, and there were grade beams, but there were pad footings for 21 load points that went all the way up and supported the red iron skeleton or the superstructure of the building. Those load points were laid out as centers on the foundation plan, but with no dimensions whatsoever. Not one dimension on the plans. No, it was laid out on XYZ coordinates. You know what XYZ coordinates are? Anybody? Well, I sure as hell didn't. Do you?
Well, not officially, but I mean like on like a 3D scale, kind of like points and
Something like that, but they're laid out the way larger buildings are laid out, like skyscrapers are laid out. And I should have realize that Bruce would do something like that, because the last building that the architect did, he did the piano house for Ted, which I'll show you in a minute, and the book house for Ted, and then the one before that was the Bilbao Museum in Spain. He's a protege of an internationally renowned architect named Frank Gehry. Bruce Wiesman Simmons drew this, he met with Ted, Ted gave him his idea, Bruce did a foam model of it, which I think is in here. But I get back to the load points on the foundation plan. XYZ coordinates was all those 21 load points, centers of our pad footings, were laid out on X, which is due north south. So I had a point, had a surveyor pick for me, and then survey due north south and give me my X coordinate, due east west, which gave me my Y coordinate, and then my elevation above sea level gave me my Z coordinate. And so on my plans, on every load point, I had an X, a Y, and a Z number. So my X number was, say, 9 foot 10 and 9/16. Seriously, I would measure up on a square, a due, right? Square up from that thing, due on that north-south line, and then do a 3, 4, 5 square and get my Y, 21 foot 5 and 3/16. There's my point. And then the Z, we would shoot that, Z elevations, once we got the points where they laid out. So we had strings like you can't believe. It was an unbelievable job. I have great pictures. I have good gallery pictures from that job. It was, no one had ever done anything like it. Anything like it. I certainly had, for the most part, well, nobody had done anything like this before. And I got to do it. And I tell you, it was like, it was a gift. It was a nightmarish gift. It had lots of problems, and I solved them all, and I had an incredible architect. The kind of architect that doesn't draw BS. It doesn't go, oh, let's do this. The kind of architect that says, what do you think we should do? You're the builder. And then, collaborate. And he wasn't the kind of guy that goes, you're the builder, you do it. He's the kind of guy that goes, how can I help it? What do you think we can do? So this is looking through the pan deck. Second floor is pan deck, which is happens a lot in commercial buildings, and that's a welded steel, like corrugated deck that you pour concrete on. And that's how almost all skyscraper type, multi-story buildings are done. Their floors are poured concrete, they're poured on a welded pan deck, which is what this is, coming out this thick. That's poured concrete, which we epoxied. We epoxied all the floors. I designed the staircase. The staircase on paper was something slightly different, and Ted wanted the staircase in the Apple Store in Washington, D.C. And we got a quote on it. It was $150,000, all glass. I didn't want to spend that. So I did this for about 35, I think. There's not much more. That's a stainless steel handrail. The balustrade's glass. The treads are 2 1/4 laminated glass. Red iron stringers, epoxy coated. Stainless brackets holding the treads. It's beautiful. By the way, this building and the grounds are tourable. It's called the Hermitage. If you Google the Hermitage, tours, I think they do 1 tour a month. Might do more than that, but I think they do 1 tour a month. I think they take 16 people. I don't know how far out they're booked. COVID, but I think they're back up. But look at this glass. Oh my God, the glass. It's insane. That is what's left of Ted's piano. That's a new keyboard. He lost his house in the fire, and he lost a $125,000 Baldwin grand piano, and that's what the replacement cost was for the piano that's in the piano house now. But that's what's left of the piano that burned, and the steel part melted. See how it melted. Then he did all these sculptures. So he's quite the guy, Ted. He's quite the looking down the staircase. Some good Rincon Ironworks did this steel. This skylight. You can just see the edge of the skylight. I thought there was a better picture of that skylight. That's the kitchen. Because we call it a house, we had to have a kitchen. That's, and the bathroom upstairs, and we had a bunch of tiles made. We had tiles made for the piano house as well, but we had these tiles made and built them to describe a library. This is the book room, after all, and we used them on the risers, treads from down below. That's the entry from the carport down below on the living side. We had to call it, right, I had to have a bedroom and a kitchen, right? Because you can't build a commercial building at 1650 Mountain Drive, East Mountain Drive. So it had to be a residence, had to be built, it has to be permitted as a residence. So the bedroom has no door, you know, but it had to have a bedroom and a kitchen. Okay, so we got those things right. And then ultimately, I had a great relationship with Dave Grunnebeck, who was my inspector, and I was all the way up to final. It was, you know, quite the journey to get to final. And I was up to what, like really the only correction was seeming insurmountable, and it was that window right there in the bedroom was an egress. It did not meet egress. You know what I mean? I know Flavio does. Anybody else know what I mean? So in Santa Barbara, if you're in a bedroom, if you're building a bedroom, if you're making a bedroom, if you're involving the city or county or anybody with a building permit on a bedroom, you have to have a window that's got egress. You have to be able to get out the window, unless you have an exterior door. If you have an exterior door to get you out, you don't need egress. You don't have to worry about egress windows. If you have no door to the outside, you've got to have a window you can get out of. It's got to be 20 by 20 square, clear. It's got to be X amount of feet off the ground. Can't be lower, can't be higher. It's got some things it's got to conform to. And if you don't have that, you can't get final. It doesn't conform, and they won't give you a final. So I was gonna, and the house is done. So I was gonna have to jump through some major hoops to get that out of there somehow, or reconfigure it and get it somehow to be egress, right? It was a thorny problem. I don't know how I was gonna do it. And so I went down and saw my friend, George Estrella, who was the head of the city building department, the head guy in the whole building department. And he's a great guy. He's very progressive, and he's a guy you can talk to. And he happened to be a friend of mine. And I said, George, what can I do? Thought about it. What? It's on the plans as a bedroom, right? I said, yep. Bedroom's got to have egress, right? Yep. Just submit a revision and call it a library. Which is what we did. We're final. Thank you, George. I love you, man. Don't take it the wrong way. But okay, so that's Ted's museum. This is Ted's house. That's the roof. The whole house is concrete. It's concrete, glass, and steel. Or actually, concrete, glass, and aluminum, some steel. There's a grand piano motif throughout the house. This is the living room skylight. That long axis on the skylight, that's 16 feet, and it's 9 feet that way. And it's all structural steel up on the roof. And the roof is all poured concrete. And that thing at that time had 3 arms and servo motors that operated that lid. And it could be operated by remote, by making it operate, or it was also triggered by wind, rain, and temperature. It was set, it had sensors. And if the wind came up to a certain knot, it would close. If it started raining, it would close. If the what was the other one? Temperature got high enough, it would close. Until a gust, because you know, gusts come up like that, just picks that, slammed it in the chimney. Now it's something completely different. But building that parapet was insane. That scupper, that skylight, which the glass slanted this way and this way, and I had to build a steel stud, you know, curving trough line of stone. I mean, this piano house was insane to build. I mean, it's crazy, crazy to build. So this is, you walk in the entry doors, and this is what you see. You see this grand piano cut out, and then there's that $125,000 Baldwin grand piano. Then you're looking out this way, it's all these windows, aluminum frame and glass, hallway curves to Ted's master suite. Oh, it's all block, grounded block. These are aluminum windows, so they were set like a block frame, but plastered too. So we didn't have the same kinds of problems because we were putting a fair amount of plaster. We could plaster to him. He hasn't had any leaks. So I find this to be interesting because the plan showed a tub over here, right? And that's the way we had it roughed in. And at one point, one of Ted's daughters said, no, I want my dad to have a soaking tub. So she gave us specs for this tub, and we did some modifications, and we had to cut the concrete very carefully because the concrete floors were getting stained, which as you can see they did. So we got the tubs moved over, and we got this tub set, or before we got the tub set, I was blocking this wall. Because it's all steel stud framing. It's grouted block, CMU is the wall, and the exterior of the wall is plaster. And then it's 3.5 inches of steel stud framing, full of Isonine, open cell foam, and then 5-inch drywall. Top of that, right? So in that steel stud wall, I was going to put some solid blocking for grab bars for Ted to be able to, grab bars to get in those tub. And I said, Ted, where are you thinking? How many grab bars do you think you want? He goes, looked at him and he goes, oh, never mind about that. So Ted, in the next week, the word goes out, don't go down to Ted's studio because he's got a nude model. So he had a nude model down there. And then like a month or two later, I can't remember the timeline, we got a crane and we lowered her down through the skylight and had the skylight glass set in. But she has a stainless steel pin in the foot. She's epoxied in. And she is how Ted grabs her arm to get out of the tub, and her hands hold the soap. That's what this guy's mind works. And then see these tiles? That's an M. Escher pattern. He's a very famous illustrator, M. Escher, and he's famous for just stuff like that. But Ted liked that pattern, and we had that pattern made by a custom tile maker. We had these are all custom tiles made in Gilton. This is the kitchen, and that's another skylight, another gigantic skylight, piano shaped skylight. That kitchen, I think there's a better picture of it. Yeah. Okay, so all the grand piano, laser cutouts, right? So Ted wanted that right there. See that island? See that? That's an exact scale of the building. That's the footprint of the building. That is the shape on the exterior. Well, that's the shape of the building. That's the shape. It used to be called the Amoeba House. And then at one point we had all this grand piano motif, and it became known as the Piano House. But that's the shape. And we're right over here in this corner. That's where the kitchen is. And so these walls are curved, right? Right here, all there. That's just one big radius. So Ted wanted a stainless steel kitchen. We got one quoted out of Chicago, Illinois, without the freight, with no installations, $178,000. Okay, Ted, what do you want to do? Well, I don't want to spend that much money on a kitchen. So I said, okay, my HVAC gave me this catalog called Garage Envy. Jay Leno endorses it. He has the cabinets in his garage. They're stainless steel cabinets. They come from Taiwan. They're pretty affordable. They come knockdown. You know what I'm talking about? Frank knows what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about? RTA knockdown, ready to assemble, or KD knockdown in a box, ready for us to put together. Put together the box, the metal box, put on the legs. The doors came in boxes, sheet metal casework and backs. So they made the right height, 30 inches, right? Sitting on a 4.5-inch kick with a 1.5-inch top, get a 36-inch countertop. And we did it. I think we did a 2-inch concrete countertop. They were the right depth, 24 deep, right, for dishwashers, for base cabinets. The upper cabinets, 12 inches deep, the right depth. 30-inch upper cabinets, perfect. Some 54-inch full depth and upper depth cabinets, which is perfect for a pantry style cabinet, right? So the heights and the depths that were available were perfect, but they were all 30 inches. Every bleeding cabinet they sell is 30 inches wide. There's no 12s, no 24s, no 15s, no 30s, no 36s. 30 inches, man. So that kitchen is all done in 30-inch cabinets. I had to design it to fit 30 inches. Now the big sink box and the big stove box are 45. I took a 30-inch cabinet and had it, you know, the welder cut it in half and weld it to 15 and 15 to make a 45-inch cabinet. But we did that kitchen for about not even 40,000, maybe 35,000, if that. We made these timbre appliance garages, 2 of them. We made those in my shop. I just love this kitchen. And I love the fact that that's the way we did the island. Isn't that cool? Do you believe that? I can't even believe I did that. This is a view from one of the roofs. These walls here. So you've seen this at Mountain Drive. You've driven by it. You've seen the book building and the piano. So it's the guy, the bicycle rider with his butt up in the air is the mailbox on Mountain Drive.
He's got like a spaceship in his backyard, doesn't he?
That's one of the 500 sculptures. Yeah, yes, but the entry doors, I'll just tell you about the entry doors and then we'll get the heck out of here. I've got so much better pictures of the entry doors, but not here. So there's a great picture. So these entry doors on the plans, again, plans, right? These entry doors on the plans are 6.0, that's 2 3-foot doors by 8.0. It's a relatively common opening for an entry for, you know, for a big expensive house. 6.0, 8.0 entry doors by owner on the plans. And so we're building this thing on a block, right? At this point, I need that jam. I need to get the jam in. So I need those doors. So Ted, where's the doors? Oh, they're down at Masters of Metal. I said, okay, cool. So I get the number, call up, I talk to the principal on it. I go, yeah, I'm, you know, building Ted's house up in Santa Barbara. I need those doors. And he goes, what are you talking about? You don't have any doors. I go, yeah, doors, Ted's doors. I said, you got them. 2 3-foot by 8-foot doors. He goes, yeah, we don't have any doors. I said, okay, what have you got of Ted's? He goes, well, we have 2 5/16 thick, approximately 36 by approximately 96 bronze bas-relief panels. One weighs 450 pounds, the other weighs 530 pounds. And they're 5/16 thick bronze bas-relief panels. And so I told Ted, you told me you had doors. He goes, yeah, they're doors. I go, no, they're not doors. Doors open and close on hinges. They latch. They do all kinds of things. Yours just sit there and do nothing. So I had to draw and design. And this is the beauty of my job, man, is that, you know, so much of the stuff, like Morgan was telling you guys, it's like, they don't know how to do it. They drew something that was just BS anyway. So you just figure it out. So I drew a stainless, and by the way, do you know about dissimilar metals? There are metals you cannot put together because it causes electrolysis. So you cannot put red iron or steel and bronze together. It's not a good thing. It'll cause electrolysis. You can put aluminum and bronze together, and you can put stainless and bronze together. You can put stainless with just about anything. So I drew and had built stainless doors that we married the bronze bas-relief panels to, and then a 1/2-inch aluminum on the inside. And then on the inside is a whole other sculpture on the inside. It's the cow jumped over the moon. It's this. I got some good pictures of it. Remind me, I'll bring them sometime. But had those done, had these giant Zerk fitted hinges done. Anyway, had red iron jams built, found closed cell neoprene for the weather stripping, for the stops, for this thermal break, and to not have the bronze hit the red steel, the red iron steel. And then Ted said, oh, by the way, the right-hand door weighs 1,080 pounds. The left-hand door weighs right at 1,000 pounds. 1,080 pounds. But they open just like. So Ted says, oh yeah, I don't want to see any lock. How the fuck am I supposed to, excuse me. Okay, no problem. So I shipped up into the head and buried a 1,500-pound electromagnetic magnet with a plate on top of the door. So when those doors are closed and you hit the button, you hear this clang. And unless you can exert 1,500 pounds, which you can't, by the way, you can't open that door until you click, and it releases them. Pretty cool. I thought so too. I gotta say, and I entered this and didn't win Builder of the Year. This project it's like, the thing was rigged. I'm still resentful. Still resentful of it. These walls here, that was Ted's old house. These walls, these big, tall, you've seen them on Mountain Drive. And those walls anchored his house. So attached to that was a spiral staircase to access the upper, and all these big redwood rafters. The whole thing was copper roof, redwood house, burned down, but he saved the copper and made sculptures out of it. We had all this engineered, the 6x6 steel, and put it on a footer and married the wall to it so the walls could stay, so the city said the walls could stay. And Ted's a happy camper, a very happy camper. And I'm a happy camper because I got to do it. And I kept you long enough. I'll see you next Wednesday. See everybody next Wednesday, but please come here and see Jim on 8:30 Saturday, okay? Oh, and by the way, what's gonna happen here is this cleanup day. So we're gonna be cleaning up, all over here. So don't wear your nice clothes, bring gloves. Or what day? Saturday lab, we're gonna clean and organize. Everybody make it, please. And you guys.
Hey, Rodney.
Everybody there.
Rodney.
We're already goodbye. Oh, we're already goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Rodney.
For sure, you guys. Good to see everybody. This is my favorite class ever. I swear to God.
Rodney, do you know where I can find the list of
Oh, you
homework
guys-
that Jim wants us
hey,
to
Tom,
turn in?
Hey, Joel. Hey, Lou. Yeah, catch you later. See you Saturday, hopefully. Yeah, Saturday. Gonna be a good one, man. Really will.
Rodney, can you hear me?
We're gonna love it.
Rodney, I have a question to ask you.
Okay, Flavio's got a question. So you guys, before I turn to Flavio, anybody, you guys, anything for me here? Joel, Lewis, Tyler?
Can you?
Guys all done? Are any of you guys here? Tyler's here.
Tyler has a question.
You're here. Joel, you here?
Tyler has a question.
Hey, I'm gonna say goodbye to Joel, Lewis, and Tyler. And then take.
Tyler has a question.
Oh, you are talking?
Yeah,
Okay, say something again.
Tyler has a question.
Okay. So hang on for me, you guys. Let me answer Flavio and then I'll answer your question, okay? And I can hear you now.
Okay, cool. You can hear me?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly. I just had the volume turned down.
This is more of what was it called? A like person to a recommendation, because I'm gonna be moving up to San Francisco after this class is over. I'm gonna be heading over there to move in with my fiance, and I'm looking to.
So you want a letter of reference?
Just someone I can put down as a reference on my
Or
resume.
do you want a letter of reference?
If you can do that, that'd be.
If you send me an email,
Mhm,
to me, send to my Utsters,
mhm.
just say, hey, it's Flavio, and for what we talked about, would you, and I will do it for you. And then you'll have a letter to say, 'cause I'm happy to do it for you.
Alright.
I would love to do it for you. You should let me do it for you, man. You'll own whatever company. But
Alrighty, thank you, Rodney. Well, that's pretty much it.
for
So,
sure, but yeah, definitely put me down as a reference, but send me an email and I'll do a reference letter for you.
thank you. Means a lot. Thank
Yeah,
you.
For sure, dude. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Don't go gay on me going to San Francisco. Oh, just kidding. Wow. Is that recorded? Crap. My luck. I didn't stop recording.